the things that they really enjoy doing, people talk about. But the relationship is, you mentioned friends or a specific teacher. And then just how you felt when you walked into that school. And so basically, that's what we're trying to capture here. The district has worked very hard at getting into the schools the social emotional learning, because we know when kids feel more confident in their social skills and social learning, their ability to interact with others, the ability to have grit and get past things that even though it's hard, I still stick to it. And so here's all the qualities that we don't currently test as far as standardized testing goes in schools, right? The ability to be compassionate, the ability to, again, have grit, stick to something. The ability to be resilient or have some critical thinking skills. Those are all skills that we can't point to on a test. And so Panorama, basically, I'm going to go through, I've trained the counselors who are kind of the facilitators at each site. And I'm just going to go through basically the same training as them, so you have an idea. If you hear Panorama, then you know what it's what it's about, and if any of the teachers might need help and assistance, and we could talk about that in a little bit. Social emotional learning, that is something that the counselors and the Office of Behavioral Learning are working on. We just know that kids, when they feel better about their circumstances and they feel better about themselves, they feel safe, they do better in school. And so Panorama has done some research about that. Again, students who are involved in programs or schools that have social emotional learning in them, again, this is their research, so don't get specific on me, but they show 13% gains in academics. Again, we know that kids can do better when they're feeling like they have the ability to be resilient and they're safe, and they are part of that community. And a lot of the social emotional work is about that community piece. We also know that we see improved classroom behaviors and lower stress levels in kiddos. And then they talk a little bit about the return on the investment. I don't have anything to do with that piece, but basically all good things come out of the ability to work with our kiddos on those social emotional competencies. And I'm going to talk about that in just a bit here as well. So, okay, so we are going to, we have already done the surveys in all of the high schools. Now, how many of you have heard of the climate survey? Raise your hand. Okay, almost everybody. So that was only certain grades, and those questions only had to do with school safety and climate. This is going to be twice a year, and I'm just going to get to, okay. It's going to be twice a year. Again, North has already taken it. I could even show you some of the responses today. And we will take it again sometime late spring. It's sometimes I get secondary and elementary a little mixed up, so I apologize. But I know eventually what the goal is that they'll take it twice a year, so that we will be able to see the results if we're making improvements in some areas. I wanted to give you a sample question. So how connected do you feel to the adults at your school? And notice it doesn't say teachers, this is adults. So one of the goals that I know school counselors have is really working with classified staff, working with the adults in the building, working with our kiddos on those social emotional skills. So wanted you to be aware. of the question. And again, they go from extremely positive to a negative response. And again, the teachers will kind of go through how to take the survey beforehand, but I wanted to give you guys an idea of what a question would look like. And we can go over some more a little bit later as well. So, okay. For elementary, this is, again, the elementary sides. They have chosen to work on these competencies, and I can get the ones for the high school in just a moment. But in elementary, they have chosen to work on growth mindset, self-management, grit, and social awareness, okay? Those are the questions that the elementary are going to survey their kiddos, because they feel like the information that they get from this is going to be really important. For school supports, that school climate, school safety, sense of belonging, and the teacher-student relationship. Okay, does anybody have any questions so far? The goal of what we're looking at. Okay. So again, I'm just going to go through the process of how they would take it. They would just enter their student ID number just like they would at lunchtime. And then currently Panorama is done in both English and Spanish. We are currently working on other languages, but they won't be ready to go until next year. So you would just click the box up the top, English or Spanish. They write their name and their school, and each survey is about 10 questions. This is performance in school. Again, another question. They're asking to gauge where they are as far as, for them, behaving well in class. Is that not at all possible to change? Or is that completely up to them to change, possible to change? So they're going to look at this and make a decision. Putting forth a lot of effort. They're going to gauge what they feel that they do. And hopefully what we'll see is some increase in their ability to say, yes, I'm able to do that. Okay. So I'm going to pull up, since we're at North, I thought you guys would like to look at, I'm going to put that down. Oh, wait, just 1 second here. How do I do that? Forgive me here, just 1 second. Okay. So this is North Salem High School's summary, and the high school competencies are in the area of self-management. Here we go. Self-management, classroom effort, emotional regulation, growth mindset, and self-efficacy. So you can see where your students, kind of gauge themselves. Again, this is a beginning point, okay? So obviously, it's on a percentile. If it's green, that means that overall they scored themselves pretty favorably. So in the area of emotional regulation, North students felt like they were able, or at least 40 to 59%, felt like they were able to regulate their emotions. But they do feel like they struggle with self-management, classroom effort, growth mindset, and especially that growth mindset and self-efficacy. What else was I going to show you? Okay, so say you are working in a classroom, and growth mindset is something that you feel, as a teacher feels, that you can work on together with your students. Another benefit of Panorama is they have something what's called the toolbox. And basically, it is a list of interventions that you can try in the classroom with your students around the area of growth mindset or around the area of self-efficacy. And that is in on the Panorama website as well. It's up here. It's actually not the toolbox. It's called the playbook, not the toolbox. It's up here called the playbook. And it gives really concrete interventions that aren't complicated, that you can do within the classroom with your teacher, working with your kids, increasing that competency. Okay? Any questions so far? Yes.
So at the beginning, they put in their ID number, their name. Is that information something that other people can see, or so it's not anonymous?
Okay, the question was, because there was a place that we put a name that she's asking if it's anonymous. One part of the survey is anonymous, one part of the survey is not. The actual competencies, where that student gauges themselves, that is not anonymous. Because we would like to see, for example, and I'll go back, the teachers, oh, I am not on my thing. The teachers get a list of their students. And it looks something like this. Oh, I'm going to do course section. So this one teacher, this is the class. So this is how the students in her class scores themselves. And then it could get even more detailed as far as students. So if you're looking, sorry, I don't want to give students names. But if you're looking, a teacher will get their class list with the competencies up on top. The darker the green, the more confident they are in their competency, in that competency. So I would be kind of worried about the ones that had the light or the white on next to their names. Yeah, I was going to say can you not read that? So, okay, good. Thank you. I was worried. I didn't know how else to do it. So the teacher can see, oh, wow, that student's really struggling in those areas. And then maybe find some interventions on the playbook that they can start working on. So I know in middle school, when I was a middle school counselor for a long time, these are the kiddos that would come through our SST or MTSS process, where teachers would come and say, I'm really concerned about this student because, their behaviors or the attendance. So this kind of gives us some information as far as counselors go that we can use to really target some interventions for those students. But does that answer your question? The school competency, and I could get off this one, is anonymous because we don't want them to base their answers if they think a teacher's going to see it. So that would be anonymous. Any other questions? Again, the whole goal. This is really exciting for us school counselors because, I used to teach language arts in middle school, and so that was kind of an easy way. You do your testing and your assessments, and you can see growth. Again, social emotional competencies is a little bit harder to see that growth, and we're really concentrating on behaviors in the classrooms to be more proficient academically. So I'm really excited about this because we finally have a way to provide those interventions and to really track the data. The other thing is, last thing, and then I'm done. Last month, the secondary principals, behavior specialists, and counselors got together, and they went through North's information with a kind of a fine-tooth comb, and planned around it, had some goals around it, what they saw. Another exciting thing in secondary, and I won't take my time to look into it, but there's a couple questions that the students actually get to respond themselves, so they could write in their answers. And then they take it, and you know what a wordle is? So the more times something is said, the bigger the word is in this mosh pit of words, right? And so it was really enlightening because at, I can't remember which high school it was, we looked at the wordle, and in the middle of the wordle was this huge word that said the word stairs. We're like, what? So we click on the word stairs, and it brings up all the comments from all the students. And it was really surprising. They took it very seriously. It wasn't, people weren't messing around. Well, there might be a couple of them, but we have learned that the stairs is a real concern for that particular school as far as safety-wise. They were requesting grips on the stairway. So we are really getting a lot of information from this, and again, with the goal of making our students as safe as possible and as efficient as possible in their emotional regulation and their social emotional competencies. Yes.
Really quick, can
No.
the surveys follow the students?
Yes. So next year, that's fine. That goes fast. 20 minutes. Yes. So next year's second grade would go up to third grade. Next year's or ninth graders, you will get that information from the middle school, eighth grade. Any other questions? We're excited. Anything we can do to help kids feel more comfortable when they come in, and that's where my heart lies. So I'm excited about it. I'm going to hand that to you.
So because implementation looks a little different across elementary, middle school, and high school, if you do have specific questions about how it is being rolled out at your school counselor would be the best person and that point of contact for you to ask any sort of clarifying questions at your own school. So Panorama is being rolled out across the district, but it does look a little different depending on your level. So, all right, we're going to move on. So Emily from the communications office is here. She has two topics she's going to talk about. One is the upcoming bond work, which we're getting really close, and then information about a new digital communication tool.
All right, so I'm taking over this little bond update. One of the really exciting things that we have going on this week that some of you guys may know is that we have our groundbreaking ceremonies for North Salem High School as well as Gubster Elementary. So on Thursday at 10, we'll be here out on the front lawn at North Salem doing our groundbreaking ceremony. We invite, if any of you guys are able to attend that, we welcome you guys to come join us. And then Gubster Elementary will also be at 11:30 on Friday. It's supposed to be possible rain on Friday, so prepare for that if that's happening. But that's the most exciting update we have at this time. So that's our quick bond update as far as for groundbreakings. But did we want to do Remind now or Remind later? Okay, so we're going to kind of jump ahead a little bit towards Remind. So I just have a quick question. How many of you guys are familiar with Remind at all? And then of all of you guys here, what schools do we have that you guys are using Remind at your schools currently? All right, so just two. Yeah. So we have a really fun announcement, an exciting announcement for you guys that each of our Salem-Keizer schools will now be rolled out and have access to the district-wide plan for Remind, which for those of you that are familiar with Remind, it'll open up a lot more streamlined communication between parents and students and their communication with their teachers and schools, as well as with our coaches and their athletes. So it'll just be a really fun, exciting opportunity for us to, help improve communication across the district, and additional communication about how that's being rolled out, and frequently asked questions about how to use it, how to talk to your parents. Different talking points for all of you guys will be created and communicated out between now and our launch, which will be right after spring break. So it'll be really, really exciting. So we just wanted to bring it here as kind of one of the first announcements for the district that this is going to be starting to be implemented. And that's about all we have on that. Yeah, absolutely.
So Remind is, the idea for Remind came out of our communication groups with our adults in schools wanting to make contacts with kids and families in a way that makes sense to kids and families, which is texting. So the Remind app is a way that allows people to send texts out, and it allows us to capture the back and forth between a teacher or between a coach or between an after-school tutor with that student. And so we can say that is the platform that we're going to be able to communicate with people in a way that makes sense to them more in real time. So it really came from groups like you wanting to maintain contact. Things like you're with the choir and a kid forgot his shoes and he's texting the choir teacher, hey, I forgot my shoes, but where do we, like those sorts of things. Remind app gives us a way to be able to do that in a way in real time, in a way that normal people communicate, which is not email for 95% of our kids. So that's what we're excited. That's why we're excited. We're hoping that we can communicate better with our families and our students, specifically our middle school and high school kids, where texting is done a lot. So, yes. Yes, the Remind app is free. It's kind of free. It's currently free, so that's how when people use it right now, you might use Slack too. Slack is another one where teachers use it a lot to communicate. So it's currently free on the platform. We actually have a paid version now that we're rolling out, and that paid version allows us to be able to monitor which schools are using it the most and which teachers are using it, and it also provides us with an ability to capture those text messages as a protection. Sometimes people text things that they wouldn't say face-to-face. It allows us to guard against that. Yes? That's a great question. So the question was, does this mean we can reduce our rotodialer usage? Which is something we talk about.
Yeah, so Remind may be a supplement, say, for emergency communications. We always send a auto dialer to all of our families whenever there's a lockdown or things like that. This platform is not going to be replacing any of our current communication channels, but it will be more of a supplement. And eventually, as we start rolling this out and getting feedback, then we'll be addressing those kinds of decisions. But, this is going to be a great platform for if you have a school party that night, or you have these other things that may not be relevant for everyone in your school, but maybe just one class, or a reminder about an event or something that's going on. This would be a much easier and more streamlined platform for parents to be receiving that information, and then to be receiving a phone call for those more urgent messages that they would need to get at that time. But with the paid plan, you'll have a lot more options than those of you that may already be using the free plan. You'll have longer message options. You'll be able to send documents. You'll be able to make voice calls. So there's lots of options throughout this. And as he mentioned, we do have some power users at a couple of our schools right now. I think Keizer Elementary is a really high user of them. And so we'll be, kind of going to those power users and getting, best practices, best ways that they've found effective for their students in their schools, and helping that to build kind of some tips and tricks for everybody throughout the district.
And in the end, it would be great to reduce the number of auto dials, because I completely understand that. I have 2 kids.
Mm-hmm.
Holy cow.
Yeah.
My phone is going to get the Remind and the rotodials.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that's the goal.
Yeah, the difference is the Remind comes as an app on the phone, so it's a little slightly different process, than hopefully not quite as annoying as
be like text and push notifications versus right in your face. Yeah.
Okay, thanks, Emily. All right, let's move on to budget update. So If you follow the newspaper at all, you may have seen that the Statesman did a front page article on more money for K-12 education, and that is in fact true. Dollars and cents wise, there is more money coming for K-12 education. The governor presents her budget, and then the Ways and Means, the co-chairs of the Ways and Means Committee come after that and follow up with their budget. So the budget that came out of the Ways and Means Committee was actually $100 million less than the governor's budget for K-12 education. So that's not a great sign. But those dollars and cents figures are higher than the money that we currently get in the state school fund. That being said, we're sitting in a very static, flat place because even though the money goes up, every person in the organization also costs us more next year than they cost us this year. So more money coming into the coffers is a great thing. It's much better than the same amount of money or less money coming, but it does not put us in a situation where we have the ability to make any strategic adds. So we're sitting in a place that's relatively flat. And because of that, there is some pretty good advocacy going on to the legislators, specifically targeting increased funds for K-12 education. So the green poster that has now come around is our Salem-Keizer advocacy poster. This is in partnership with lots of different organizations, COSO, Oregon School Boards, a bunch of different organizations saying we need to tell our legislators that we need more money for K-12 education. And specifically, there is a target of 4 pockets of funds, and you'll see that about the top third of the page. Oregonians are calling for investments in public schools. They want smaller class size, well-rounded education, student health and safety, and more learning time. So that narrative at the bottom describes how we would utilize additional funds in those 4 buckets of money. So you will likely continue to get information from your associations if you are a member, and we will continue to keep you updated. Obviously, the media will continue to provide info on what's happening with the legislators and the budget for the state school fund. But just keep in mind, we are in a relatively flat status quo, what we would call current service level mode right now. And so if you were celebrating all those extra dollars, sorry. No more celebrating. Anyways, so that is information for you to keep and share with your colleagues back in your building. Another update, snow days. We missed 3 full days of instruction, and district leadership are trying to finalize a plan to see what that would look like for us to redeem some of that instructional time and or specifically be able to provide opportunities to our classified staff to try to make you whole for the wages that you lost on the days that you were not at work. That plan has not yet been finalized, but it should be out most definitely before you leave for spring break at the end of this week. So look for that information to come. It will come to you in multiple ways. We'll push that out, obviously, via email. Our communications department will do a good job of getting that information out to all of our employees as well. But know that it is important to us to ensure that kids get access to instructional time that they've lost. So that's a significant consideration, as well as considering how to offer our employees the opportunity to be made whole financially when they've lost wages, while also remembering that we do have schools that will be undergoing significant construction projects, and several of those projects are set to start the minute kids are out of the building. So we will have some special circumstances in four schools that are having our largest projects. So that's where we are with snow days, and details will come on that in the next few days. So just the last 2 items on the agenda are from Suzanne West, our Director of Elementary Curriculum and Instruction. So for those of you who are not in elementary land, this is simply an FYI, but an update from her.
Thank you. So the first update is regarding our EPR, which is our progress report. We have a group of teachers right now, about 20 of us, who are working on updating the progress report. And we're looking at a couple of different things as we are doing this work. The first is shortening it. So right now when it prints out, it's about 4 pages of like 7-point font. And it's a lot of education ease. So we're looking at reducing the number of pages that print out that are text-based and simplifying the language in those pages. And we're also looking at a graphical representation of at least some of the data. so that parents who receive that report card, that progress report, can at a glance tell how their student is progressing rather than having to weed through a bunch of text to decipher that information. So these are all recommendations that have come from the team that's working on this, as well as from people around the district. We're about halfway through with the process. Our hope is that a couple of more meetings and we will have a sample that we can bring out to larger stakeholders. So we want to hear from staff around the district who have an opportunity to look at those samples, but also to hear from parents. So we have plans to take these to parent groups as well and make sure that we're providing meaningful information to parents on their students' progress. Because the reality is, once we print those progress reports, they go in a CUME file and we never look at them again. The progress report is really a way for us to communicate meaningful information to our parents. That's our end user, and we need to make sure that we're providing them what they need in that regard. So what questions can I answer for you about that? Groovy. All right, number 2. Over the last few years, we have seen an increase in the number of elementary students who are accessing inappropriate content on the internet. This year in particular, there have been a lot of incidents across all of our elementary schools in this regard. And the 2 websites that seem to be the biggest culprit for our elementary students are YouTube and Vimeo. So based on some feedback that we've received from principals and from teachers at the elementary level, we will, before the school year is over, block YouTube and Vimeo just for students. So staff will still have full access. So if a teacher or if you as an instructional aide or whatever your role is in the school want to show a student a video because it has educational purposes, you can still do that. But students won't be able to access that content on their own when they log in using their student login. And we think that this will prevent at least some of the inappropriate access that's taking place. Now, we're not naive. Kids who are really determined will find a way. But we think this is a good step forward in keeping our littlest students safe so that they're not seeing content on the internet that they shouldn't. We'll be sending out some communication to schools in this regard and some tips for staff on alternative sites that you might access if you are looking for those educational videos. And we won't do any of this probably for at least another month or so because we need to make sure we communicate it well, give staff time to adjust if necessary. We don't want to just pull the trigger and disrupt instructional plans across the district. So what questions can I answer for you about that change? And there's no change at the secondary level, by the way. Boy, you're easy. Or you just want to go out and enjoy the sunshine. All right, thank you.
All right, those were the predetermined topics for the agenda. Anything else that I can attempt to field from the front here? Other questions, concerns, rumor control? Edie.
So this is class size and additional adults, reduce adult student ratios and on A2.
Correct. That is a priority that has been set. So those 4 buckets were not identified by Salem-Keizer. Those 4 buckets were identified by the legislators. So there is a focus on primary students, sort of the premise being that focus again on teaching kids to read and being successful by the end of 3rd grade. So, sorry I didn't repeat the question. Anything else? I'm more than happy to stay, but I'm also ready to let you go and be in the sunshine. So thanks so much for coming. I know this is probably a crazy place to be on a Monday afternoon, but I appreciate your time.